Everyone ready? I'm pleased to introduce Danny Werfel, the 50th Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. As Commissioner, he presides over the nation's tax system, which collects approximately $4.1 trillion in tax revenue each year. Commissioner Werfel oversees an agency of about 90,000 employees, some of whom are in the audience, and an annual budget of more than $12 billion. He has an extensive range of experience inside and outside of government. Prior to becoming commissioner, he was the global leader of Boston Consulting Group's public sector practice after having led their public sector practice in North America. In these roles, he worked with government agencies worldwide on finances, service delivery, transformation plans, and risk assessment initiatives. Before working with the Boston Consulting Group, Commissioner Werfel served in the federal government for more than 15 years, including 7 months as acting commissioner. Prior to his appointment as acting commissioner, he was controller of the Office of Management and Budget, where he led efforts across the federal government to improve program integrity, including financial management, financial reporting, and accounting standards, among others. He also served at OMB as Deputy Controller, Chief of Financial Integrity and Analysis Branch, Budget Examiner in the Education Branch, and Policy Analyst in the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. He's also served as a trial attorney in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Commissioner Werfel has received both national and local awards from the Association of Government Accountants for his contributions to federal financial management. He received the Presidential Rank Award for Meritorious Service in 2008. He also served as a member of the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board from 2006 to 2009 and the Defense Business Board from 2014 to 2016. He holds a master's degree in public policy from Duke University, a Juris Doctor from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and a bachelor's degree in industrial and labor relations from Cornell University. Interviewing him today will be Tracy Gordon. Dr. Gordon is co-director and acting Robert C. Posen director of the Urban-Brookings Tax Policy Center, where I work, where she conducts research on fiscal challenges facing state and local governments, including budget trade-offs, intergovernmental relations, and long-term sustainability. Before joining Urban, she was a senior economist with the White House Council of Economic Advisors. She's also been a fellow at the Brookings Institution, an assistant professor at the University of Maryland, and a fellow at the Public Policy Institute of California. She was a member of the District of Columbia Infrastructure Task Force and the District of Columbia Tax Revision Commission. She serves on the Board of Trustees for the American Tax Policy Institute and the California Budget and Policy Center. Dr. Gordon has written extensively on state and local government finances, including taxes, budgeting, intergovernmental relations, municipal debt, and pensions. She's appeared in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Washington Post, and on C-SPAN, Fox Business News, and NPR. She holds a PhD in public policy with a concurrent master's degree in economics from the University of California in Berkeley. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Commissioner Werfel and Dr. Gordon.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Commissioner Werfel, for being here today. As Rob said, you've worn many hats in your career in the private sector at Boston Consulting Group, in the public sector at OMB, and we were just sharing that I think I first met you when you were helping to implement the 2009 American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. So from where I sit, a constant through line in your career has been this relishing of using data to make government work better. So it's a very auspicious time for you to be at the IRS, and we're thrilled to have you at this conference, which, after all, is a research conference on tax administration, a pretty wonky place to be. So I think we've got the right lunchtime speaker. Let's start with the big picture, your vision for the agency. We've heard from you and in various media reports about projects that are going on, but what are you hoping the IRS will look like in 5 years, and how will it be different from today?
It actually took me a bit of time to work with the team to hone the vision. I recall when I first got to the IRS, the team said, you should do some media training because, you're going to be talking to the media a lot and you don't have a lot of experience there. So, okay, I'm open to that. And I sat down in like a makeshift pretend studio, and the first practice question they gave me was, so you got all this money, Commissioner, what are you guys going to do with it? And I droned on and on and on for 5 minutes until someone said, cut, like, you got to hone this a little bit better. And the vision statement has to be, what we're going to do needs to be easy to understand. It needs to feel, it needs to be inspirational, and it needs to be nonpartisan. So I think where we need to be in 5 years is as follows. There's really 3 pieces to the vision. The first is one that centers on modernization. And to make it real, I like to bring it home. And I tell people that my parents, who are in their 80s, have never used an ATM machine in their lives. And my children, who are in their 20s, have never been inside a bricks and mortar bank. And we are building an IRS and need to build an IRS for my children and for the future generations of taxpayers that will that do everything from their smartphone and their tablets. It's a generational imperative that we're moving in that direction effectively. And so picture, if you go to your favorite online bank, there's nothing you can't do, right? You're interested in seeing a statement from October 2022, 3 clicks away and you have it. Someone said, oh, this check, I forgot to enter it on the registry. 3 clicks away and you have the actual picture of the check in front of you. Everything can be done virtually. And so the vision statement starts with every taxpayer should be able to do every interaction with the IRS digitally or virtually if they choose. Now, there's 2 other parts to the vision once we achieve that, because if we achieve that, it unlocks capacity. It unlocks capacity because if we're fully digital in that way, we'll have less people walking into our walk-in centers, less people calling our 1-800 numbers. We will have less errors and quality control issues to deal with because these types of automated solutions lend themselves to control environments that cut down on errors. What are we going to do with this unlocked capacity is the next part of the vision. And while the bank example, banks may be laying people off or doing things differently, that's not the IRS. We're actually hiring while we're modernizing. Through this effort, we can unlock our capacity to do 2 things: help people that need it the most and scrutinize those that warrant it the most. On the helping people that need it the most, there's so many dimensions to this, but there's a lot of problems in our tax system today that cannot be solved with these digital solutions. An example would be roughly 7 million Americans each year who are eligible for the Earned Income Tax Credit but don't claim it. Why don't they claim it? What is the access barrier that is there, that exists, that these individuals who would benefit so much from one of the most important anti-poverty programs in the US government, and they're not getting it? There's work that we can do. In these underserved communities, these distressed communities, that's where these communities are the most vulnerable to being exploited by tax scams and schemes, the most likely to be victimized. With our unlocked capacity, we can do more to disrupt these scams, to educate these communities about the risks that the tax system today presents. And we can support them if, unfortunately, they've been victimized in much better ways than we are today. And on the holding people more accountable or scrutinizing those that warrant it the most, I like to say, let's start with the tax scam artists and those that are perpetrating the schemes, because we're just scratching the surface there. There's a lot more investigative and enforcement work to be done to hold these bad actors accountable. And then obviously there's a whole host of tax evasion going on that in the years that we were underfunded, we fell behind in terms of being able to assess and make sure all taxpayers are paying what they owe and not a penny more. But in particular, it's the wealthy, the complex, the large filers where we fell the most behind, because the more simpler the return, the less investment we need to keep pace. The more complicated return, the more investment we need to keep pace, and we didn't have that investment, we fell behind.
My colleague Janet Holtzblatt, among others, has documented the decline in resources to the IRS and how the Inflation Reduction Act, as you mentioned, reversed that trend. What do you think have been the successes so far that you can see from the 2024 tax filing season that just wrapped up?
Absolutely. So, if you take a step back and it's like, okay, so we basically had our budget cut every year from 2010 to 2022, while the tax system got a lot larger, and our requirements as an organization grew exponentially. More filers, more, obviously hundreds, if not thousands of tax law changes, new programs like the Affordable Care Act, all of which took place in this window on a declining resource base. So we had to, recognize that the level of investment was going to have a deteriorating effect on some of the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. The IRS deserves a lot of credit for, over those 12 years, piecing together a variety of different successful activities, including launching successfully the Affordable Care Act, including getting important impact payments out during COVID. But by the time we got to 2022, and in particular with the introduction of the pandemic disrupting our operations and the underfunding, things started to rip apart at the seams. So with the new funding, the first thing we needed to do was what I like to say is get back to par performance. And that we've been able to do. So that meant hiring roughly 5,000 customer service reps, putting them on the phones, in accounts management, in our walk-in centers, to make sure that we're answering the phone. Because in tax year 2022, our level of service was record low. The length of time that you waited on the phone was a record high. Our audit rates were anemic, and our technology was stagnating. All of those trends now are reversed, with the most impactful being our taxpayer service, because last filing season, we had a nearly 90% level of service versus it being under 30% in 2022. Our wait time on our 1040 line was 3 minutes on average versus over 30 minutes in 2022. So we're back to par. But we have an opportunity, as I mentioned earlier, to build a much better vision and version of the IRS. So we are making progress. This idea of every taxpayer should be able to do everything digitally if they choose. There are big rocks that can contribute to that we are moving. One is the launch and the enhancement of the individual online account and the business tax account. And the tax professional account, so that you do have this in an authenticated environment, a place where you can have view into your situation and start to get your work done. And so we have added both in filing season 23 and most recently in this last filing season, new functionality in each of those accounts. And next year we have a whole set of new functionality that will be deployed between now and filing season 25. So it's almost like that thermometer that fills up, like we're filling that thermometer to make sure that increasingly everything can be a click away. Related to that is our paperless initiative, and that's not just behind the scenes at the IRS, that's so that taxpayers never have to go to a paper form. I know it sounds crazy in 2024 that they still do need to do that, but they do, because we have work to do to create this modern vision. And so we have worked with something called our document upload tool to make an increasing number of correspondence and forms available to taxpayers to submit electronically. And then on the other side of the IRS, we just have a lot of paper. And that may be go for many years to come. Because remember, when I said the vision statement, it is all digital transactions if you choose. At the IRS, we're about choice. And we want taxpayers to pick the filing method that works best for them. And so if you ever have an occasion to visit a submission processing center at the IRS, we have 3 of them, Kansas City, Austin, and Ogden, Utah. you will marvel at how much paper continues to come into the IRS every single day. So we want more digital options to cut down on that paper inflow, but then also we are now investing through the Inflation Reduction Act in much more sophisticated modern scanning equipment so that as soon as the paper comes in, we're putting it into machine readable format so that we're managing more in a digital environment. Because right now, this is an evolution, it's taking place over time, but right now as you navigate through the halls of the IRS in these locations, it's a lot of paper. And with paper is inefficiency, and with paper is more prone to error. And with and there's an opportunity to create just a much more modern and more effective environment, which will benefit taxpayers in innumerable ways.
You've talked a lot about expanding enforcement and ensuring fairness in tax administration. If we were to focus for a moment on wealthier taxpayers and complex partnerships, which has been an area of some difficulty for the IRS in the past, where does that effort stand right now?
Yeah, so it goes back to this idea of an equitable tax system. And we have a range of different taxpayers. We have taxpayers who can't afford an accountant. We have taxpayers that can't afford the fee for a software. All the way up to taxpayers that can afford to hire an army of lawyers and accountants to provide the most tax advantage status for them. And so our challenge at the IRS is in that, with all that diversity of means and an ability to invest, to navigate what is a very complicated tax system for everyone, what can the IRS do to even that playing field so that there is equity? And on the one hand, we need to do more to help those that can't afford the resources to navigate the complexity. So that's about, investing more, working with our volunteer tax clinics, our tax counseling for the elderly, doing things like I described earlier in terms of breaking down barriers so that taxpayers get access to the earned income tax credit and are protected from tax scams. But on the high wealth side, those that can, the larger, more complicated organizations, when we are not investing, we are falling behind in terms of understanding how tax evasion emerges in this part of the taxpayer spectrum. When I talk about this, I always want to emphasize that so many of the taxpayers that are at this end of the spectrum are doing the right thing and are playing by the rules. But there are a material number of taxpayers that are not. And for everyone involved, whether you can afford to hire an accountant or not, it's in everyone's interest that the IRS is doing an effective job of scrutinizing the taxpayers that aren't playing by the rules. Because if you're a CFO or CEO and you run a large company, multinational company, and you're playing by the rules, you want an IRS that has the capability to make sure that your competitors are playing by the rules and that there's an even playing field there as well. So what are we doing? Well, hiring. It's a multi-pronged effort. There's not one single solution. So this year, 2024, and fiscal year 2024, there's been an amazing emphasis. While fiscal year 2023, the emphasis really was on customer service rep hiring. This year has been on exam hiring, both auditors and lawyers, but also data scientists, engineers, others, subject matter experts in industries, crypto experts, all of it, so that we are building a diverse skill set to be able to have the right footprint to be able to scrutinize where we can. We are starting to launch a variety of different targeted campaigns that will both demonstrate to the American people that we are making good on our commitment to focus on Inflation Reduction Act resources on this part of the tax spectrum. but also that can return funds quickly to demonstrate that this is a positive return on investment. So for example, we've launched an effort on high wealth tax delinquents and high wealth non-filers. So I call it our high risk list. We are maintaining a high risk list of millionaires and above that are tax delinquent, and focusing and making sure that we're collecting those funds. We're also maintaining a high risk list of those that earn $400,000 or more that haven't filed in multiple years. We are taking steps to launch focus campaigns in areas like transfer pricing. We are looking a lot more closely at complex partnerships, where we have had a very low audit rate. And when you have that type of situation, it breeds an opportunity for tax avoidance to start to bleed into tax evasion. So it's a combination of hiring. We're also, by the way, investing in AI solutions that are helping us to select the right cases for audit, and to understand where tax evasion is occurring, and getting the help from much more sophisticated analytics to make sure that we're selecting the right cases for audit. So again, it is a multi-pronged effort. It is not anything where the world changes overnight. On some of the delinquent tax collection and non-filers, there is some overnight changes, but for some of this work, both building the team at the IRS and launching an audit campaign, that is a long process. Doesn't make it less. It's important, and we have to have the patience to be playing the long game, and that's what I think we're doing at the IRS.
Some of the people that you've described, these highly skilled folks, you're competing with the private sector. This is expensive. Is that a challenge in this sort of tech-enabled transformation of the IRS? And how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, this is something that, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, I wouldn't have had an appreciation for the tough labor market. We have this incredible opportunity to rebuild the IRS workforce. Just to give you a sense of it, at our low point before the Inflation Reduction Act, our staff size was roughly the same as it was in the late 70s. And when we compare the IRS internationally, we just see, just in raw numbers, how much smaller than we are. I think, for example, Canada has 65 million people and 65,000 employees. We have 330 million people and 95,000 employees. So we are, and when we meet internationally with our colleagues in other tax authorities, they frequently comment about how small the IRS is on a per capita basis compared to the other nations. So we have a lot of room to grow, and this manifests itself in things like not being able to answer all the phone calls, not being able to do all the victim assistance we want to do when someone is victimized, for example, by identity theft. Or to make it as plain as I can, a walk-in center in a given location can serve 300 people a day if it's fully staffed and operating on all cylinders. We have 400 people show up, 500 people show up, sometimes 1,000 people show up in a day. We move to an appointment schedule. We have every appointment booked for months into the future because of the demand to engage the IRS because of how complicated our tax system is. And we want to be there for these people. And so that's when I talk about hiring, I think people think about, well, it's hiring all these auditors for scrutiny. It's actually, there's a lot of hiring that needs to be done just so that we're serving taxpayers and being able to answer questions as well. To your more specific question, look, we have a lot that we have to understand about why people want jobs today and what their interest is. I was just in Boston this week meeting with the team. We have a large facility in Andover, Massachusetts, and we were having conversations about the employees that are coming out of into the workforce today. And I share, when I came out of the workforce, came into the workforce, and I was a GS9 at OMB, and my first few days there, first few weeks, first few months, I looked at the senior most civil servants at OMB, probably at the time in their 50s or their 60s, and I said, that's what I want to be. I really did. I said, this is like, for me,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of people like me felt that way in the mid 90s. Like, I pictured myself at OMB for 30 or 40 years because I wanted to be that person, but that's not the case today. People come in and they see the cubicles or whatever. They don't want to be here for years and years and years. They want a more dynamic career.
Right.
We have to talk to people about along their dynamic career doing a stop at the IRS.
Right.
Because that is going to be helpful to them in terms of their own diversity of life experience, but also helpful for them in building a foundation of skills and experiences that will help them get them where they want to go on their career journey. There's also obviously, kind of calling on people for their service. I think it's much more likely that we're going to hire someone who has a public service gene in them. The other message I often tell people if I'm recruiting is I say, this is not your parents' IRS. And what I mean by that is, I'm the 50th commissioner. The IRS was created during the Lincoln administration. An income tax was created to fund the Civil War. For many decades after the creation of the IRS, the only function was assessment and collection. That's not the case anymore. In the past, in the more recent history of the IRS, we are now a key part of the most important public policies of our time. 3 examples: wealth inequality or anti-poverty, and that's with all the refundable credits that we implement that are some of the most important programs that address poverty that the U.S. government has. The second is healthcare access, and it's the IRS that's really running the guts of the Affordable Care Act, which is the financing is anchored through the premium tax credit. And now with the Inflation Reduction Act, climate change. Because many observers have indicated that the tax credits in the Inflation Reduction Act are some of the most important programs to fight climate that have ever been enacted by any government worldwide. And so what I offer is that not only is the IRS about tax and tax administration, which many people are passionate about, which is great, but we also are involved in things that are have much broader impact on important policy imperatives. So you take all of that and you try to make the case, and I would say we're having success, mixed success. We are having people come in that could make a lot more money elsewhere, but are I think joining our effort for us however long we have them, and that's true of almost every employee now. I think all organizations and government organizations need to start operating in a world where the 30-year veteran, the 40-year veteran might be something that we have to, unfortunately, in my opinion, think differently about.
I have many more questions that I would love to ask you, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask for this group, how can we help? We're at a conference on tax administration research, and you've got a lot of people in here with a lot of brains and a lot of dedication, as you mentioned, and a commitment to public service. So what can we do to help?
I mean, first of all, I'm very appreciative of the partnership. It's one of the things that's been very inspiring for me is to learn about the partnerships that the IRS has and to realize almost from day one that the IRS does not run the tax system alone. If we did, it would not work. And such an important part of what the IRS does is the research and is creating an evidence base for what we do. And where I'm also, it's not lost on me that we house such important data that can be useful for researchers in so many different facets of public policy and public administration. I start with, kind of continuing to align on those first principles of figuring out how to expand our research and our research capabilities while also balancing the other factors at play, like data security and privacy. And I think there's win-wins, right? There's expansions and evolutions that can happen while we continue to actually strengthen data privacy and data security. And so we have to kind of figure out how to work together to make sure that we are seizing those opportunities to do those things. The other area is that you are helping fill in gaps for us for where we may either not have it on our research agenda or not have the current ability to assess these questions. I think it is very useful when someone on the outside can present to us an analysis or a viewpoint that is complementary or supplementary or maybe even paradigm shifting to the way we think about things. I would offer back to the vision and the priorities that I outlined earlier and ask to make sure that the research agenda is reinforcing and supporting that. It's important for us to understand how how these generational shifts will impact taxpayer behavior. It's important to understand what the steps the IRS can take to increase trust in a voluntary tax compliance system. It's important to understand what the state of play is on equity, equity by income, equity by race, and equity by any other relevant characteristic that we try to study, but can be helped. I think something that I'm not sure is been front and center on research in this space is to understand how the complexity of the tax system and the change in the way the information age is emerging, how that is leading to victimization and compromising the integrity of the tax system. Look no further than the bad tax advice that's out there on social media that goes viral, right? We have a lot of misinformation in the system. We need to better understand how to disrupt that. We need to better understand how to communicate with people, how to create financial literacy, tax literacy, and civics literacy in a social media world. And if we don't develop those types of disciplines and skills, we're going to have an increasingly larger headache for taxpayers who are falling prey to these types of misinformation. And we see, I come from the IRS, so I know it's playing out not just in the tax space, but we saw significant issues with it this past filing season, with bad advice on social media, resulting in a lot of headaches for taxpayers filing their taxes based on this misinformation. And so I think more research needs to be done to understand how the information age and how it's evolving is changing taxpayer behavior, and where it can be turned into a strength rather than a weakness.
That's something that we're looking at the Tax Policy Center as well, just increasing tax literacy and really helping people understand the many ways the tax code runs through so many aspects of life. So we often say that climate change policy is tax policy, or education policy is tax policy. And there are plenty of issues for us to be looking into to make the system work better.
Yeah.
So thank
It
you.
reminds me, someone sent, speaking of social media, and I'm not a social media expert or a reel expert, but someone sent me a reel, and.
Oh, I thought you were saying REAL.
No,
Yeah.
REEL. And the reel was just someone staring off into space, and it said, thinking about how I spent all that time in high school learning trigonometry and no time learning how to do my taxes. And I thought
like
that
it.
was, I think that's important. Like, it's funny, but it's also reflective of the fact that the education that we provide to people around tax literacy is minimal. And then when you are able, when someone who's posting for clicks or whatever their inspiration is for posting bad information is, can get into that space
Yeah.
that communicates with certain generations, it can be very dangerous.
Yep.
Because they don't have that base knowledge of understanding. So things become very believable because they're seeing it in this space. So unfortunately, we have an uphill battle here.
Well, or a very full agenda
Full
of research
agenda.
and policy work that we
Exactly.
could do. I'm getting the
Exactly.
hook from Ivy over there. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank
My
you for your
pleasure.
partnership. Thank you for your service.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.